Some of you in the comment sections have noticed a similarity between my videos and A Dose of Buckley. I guess that comes when you make mostly voiceover videos and have a cynical view on the world. I'll admit that A Dose of Buckley was a major influence on my channel and that some of my videos pretty much completely copied his format. Although at this point I just wish I could get 1% of the views he does. Anyways, when I watch Buckley's videos, I usually either completely agree with him, mostly agree with him, or am indifferent about the subject. However, a while back he released a video that I very much disagreed with, when he made fun of people who say they were born in the wrong generation and argued that popular culture, particularly popular music, has not gotten worse with time. It's just people's perception that it has. I am well aware that popular music, defining popular music as a type of songs you hear on the Billboard Top 40, has always been pretty crappy. When I was in high school, I had a math teacher who was an old DJ from the 60s and 70s, and he had a radio show on a local station. Most of his shows were pretty good, but when he didn't have a better idea, he would play the top 40 from that week in some year in the 60s. So I would tune in and he would say, "Today we'll be counting down the top 40 from this week in 1969. And I would say, "Awesome! I can't wait to hear songs from the Beatles' Abbey Road, the Rolling Stones' Let It Bleed, the Who's Tommy, or either of Led Zeppelin's first two albums." And then I would listen to the whole show and not hear a single song from any of these albums, but instead hear songs like 2525 by Zager and Evans. Out of the top 40, you might get a song or two by the Beatles, which would actually be decent, maybe a song or two by the Rolling Stones, The Who, Eric Clapton, or other British Invasion type rock artists, then maybe a couple of actually memorable R&B, soul, Motown type songs. The remaining 35 out of 40 top songs would be total crap, songs that you would never want to hear more than once, if even that much. I'm well aware that the following rock music legends all have one thing in common. Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, The Who, The Grateful Dead, James Brown, Bob Marley, Johnny Cash, Van Morrison, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Joni Mitchell, Pat Benatar, The Band, Black Sabbath, Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, The Kinks, The Ramones, and Crosby, Stills and Nash. What was it? The fact that none of them ever had a #1 US single. Chuck Berry had a #1 hit, but it was not any of the songs he wrote that revolutionized rock and roll. It was My Ding-a-Ling, a stupid ditty about his penis. So I'm not going to argue that what we think of as classic rock was ever super popular, although it's not like these artists were unknown back in the day. I'm sure that anyone who paid any attention to music whatsoever knew who they were, even if they weren't regulars on the type of radio stations that teenage girls and their weird moms listened to. So I'm not saying that this music was necessarily the most popular music at any time in history. My point is that it existed in the past, and I really don't feel like it exists today. I know that there are hipsters who will argue that I need to listen to more indie rock, and I'll admit that there are some decent artists that have come out of the indie music scene. Take, for example, the Black Keys. They're a good band, I enjoy their music, but if they existed in 1970, I'm not sure they'd even make my top 50 bands on the planet at that time. If there's a band out there on the indie music market that's as good as the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, oh screw it, let's pick mid-level artists from back in the day. If there's a band out there that's as good as the Kinks or CCR, I would really like to know what rock they're hiding under. I know that I have focused mostly on rock music in this video, but I feel like other genres have declined too. Country music used to mean Johnny Cash or Merle Haggard. These were artists that even non-country fans could appreciate. Now country music means artists like Luke Bryan and Blake Shelton, who no one besides a redneck looking to make a statement would ever listen to. R&B used to mean soulful singers like Sam Cooke, Aretha Franklin, and Otis Redding. Now it means a whole load of guys who half sing, half talk into an auto-tune about their favorite strip clubs. Rap music hasn't been around as long, so it peaked later than these other genres, probably at some point in the 1990s. But I think basically every rap music fan you talk to will admit that the glory days of rap are behind us. Also, let's not pretend that crappy pop music hasn't gotten crappier with time. Bubblegum pop artists back in the day used to play instruments, sing without auto-tune, do some of their own songwriting, and at least pretend to be legitimate musicians. Ricky Nelson was very much the 50s, 60s equivalent of someone like Miley Cyrus. He reached fame at a young age as an actor on a family-friendly sitcom. He then tried to make the difficult transition into being a legitimate adult singer. While the result may not have always been great, his music career wasn't a fraction as cringe-inducing as Miley's. So that's what people mean when they say they were born in the wrong generation. Wouldn't it have been fun to be alive when all this music was coming out, and not just be reading about it on Wikipedia 50 years later, or hearing stories from your grandparents? Wouldn't it have been fun to actually go to a concert by one of these artists? And actually in their prime, not when they're so old that they look like a wax statue of themselves that's been left out in the sun too long. I agree that any unpopular teenager today who thinks, man, if only I could have gone to high school in the 70s, I would have been one of the cool kids, is just a victim of wishful thinking. You would have been just as much of a social reject then as you are today, and probably would have felt even more all alone in the world because you wouldn't have been able to find other like-minded social rejects on Tumblr and Reddit. And for all the guys out there, sure, there might have been a lot of free love going around in the 60s, but that doesn't mean you would have gotten any. I can assure you that at no point in human history have women sought after doughy, unathletic, pimple-faced teenage dweebs. You would have spent all 4 years of high school drooling over the same issue of Playboy that your friend somehow got his hands on and sold to you for $100, then you hid in your mattress to keep your mom from finding it while you were at school. Probably is even best for music fans to be around today rather than back then. All of this music is already out for you. You don't have to wait until your hair is turning gray for Touch of Grey by the Grateful Dead to be released. With YouTube and Spotify, you can listen to any song you want for free, as opposed to having to buy clunky vinyl records. But yes, from a generational pride perspective, I do feel like I was born in the wrong generation.